Economics of crime. Now, crime together with other economic indicators such as employment and inflation are often used to assess the well-being of a country or a state. I am certain many of you have come across articles or statistics that reads top 10 safest country in the world or something along those lines, often alluding to blue-collar crime. Now, we can agree that crime, or crime prevention I should say, plays an important role in any economy. It improves investment, and if done correctly, it may even win elections. Plus, nobody wants to live in a place where crime is high for obvious reasons. For something that is very crucial to us, you would think that we would have a firm understanding on the methodology of crime prevention, but that doesn't seem to be the case. What we do know is poverty and education level have a strong correlation with crime. The ideal recipe, some would say, would be to increase education and lower poverty. Others would say the increase in education is all that is required because intuitively it will reduce poverty level, and this is because education and earning capacity are positively correlated, thus reducing poverty and crime. Now, to put it simply, education improves the welfare of an individual, and as a result, they are less likely to indulge in criminal activities. Now, over the years, education has been heavily funded, but the issue of crime is still persistent. Is the implementation and quality of education poor? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, and it requires more than just funding. But that is a topic for another video, perhaps economics of education. Now, coming back to the subject of crime. Like many issues in an economy, it is often sophisticated and dynamic. A superficial understanding on the matter will only bring temporary gains, or even worsen the issue. The point I'm trying to make here is that linear thinking often misguides or doesn't accurately represent the true picture of an issue. Yes, education is the ultimate variable that may end the underlying issue, but it obscures other variables that are also significant, and it may not be as complex in its implementation as education is. A perfect example of this was illustrated by Professor Stephen Levitt in his popular book Freakonomics, and also a comprehensive study in his research paper. Up until the 90s, crime was a major issue in the US. Statistics showed that violent crimes such as homicide were in their highest compared to previous decades, and criminologists predicted that the trend will only continue. However, that wasn't the case. Both optimistic and pessimistic projections made by criminologists were unable to capture the reality, where blue-collar crime fell approximately by 35 to 45%. Almost all experts expected crime to significantly increase in the 90s, but that wasn't the case. They were wrong, and the scale of their inaccuracy was impressive. I mean 35 to 45%. Now, researchers rushed to explain the drastic drop in crime and postulated 5 factors were responsible. And these 5 were a strong economy, changing demographics, better policing strategies, better gun controlling laws, and the increased use of capital punishment. Professor Levitt, however, feels that the impact of these factors were overstated and overhyped. One of the so-called biggest theory was a better economy. Yes, during the 90s, the economy was doing relatively well, which saw a drop in unemployment of 2%, which intuitively should deter crimes that are based on financial incentives such as burglary, motor car theft, and robbery. But that doesn't account for the violent crimes such as homicide. Also, a 2% drop is unlikely to bring a 40% drop in crime. In the 60s, when the economy was thriving, crime rate was high, suggesting that the correlation between economic prosperity and crime is overstated, which eludes that economic prosperity, or GDP, doesn't mean equal distribution of wealth. The second theory was changing demographics, and the theory goes like this. The average population was getting older, and statistics showed that the propensity to commit crime, or the likeliness to commit crime as someone got older, specifically reaching the age of 30s and 40s, is lower, as most crime is committed by young adults between the age of 19 to 28. However, this theory doesn't hold because aging population is a subtle process. Hence, the drop in crime should have also been subtle, unlike the rapid drop in the 90s. Changing demographic did play a role, but not enough to paint a full picture to explain the drop in crime rate during the 90s. Some researchers also claim that the use of capital punishment was responsible for the drop in crime in the 90s. They claim that it has deterred potential criminals as they feared the severe repercussion. Now, there has been a significant jump in execution from the 80s to the 90s. 4 times to be exact. But statistics showed that the probability to face execution is only 0.5% in the 90s, which was similar to previous years. Although there was a jump in execution, which was due to an increase in crime, the overall probability remained relatively low, which is a poor deterrent mechanism. It is also important to note that capital punishment only attempts to clarify a drop in homicide cases, as the sentences is only applicable to said crime, but not other types of crimes that are mentioned earlier. Now, according to Professor Levitt, there were 4 factors that were underrepresented or never mentioned that played a significant role in curbing crime during the 90s. The first one was the increased number of police. The increased number of police played a far more important role in curbing crime than many had thought. As crime became a topic of choice in the nations, politicians immediately, in a knee-jerk reaction, increased the number of police. Although this may have been a political response, it was an effective one. The number of police officers per capita, which is tracked by the FBI and reported annually in the Uniform Crime Reports, showed that police force increased by 14% during the period. Now, the correlation between police force size and reduction in crime is strong. A conservative estimate showed that a 14% increase in police unit brought about 5 to 6% reduction in all crimes. Now, it is also important to note, however, its effectiveness diminishes after a certain threshold. We can't just be adding police officers and expect crime to fall. The second reason is the increased number of incarceration. From the year 1972 to the year 2000, people who were in prison swelled by 4 times to 2 million. This, similar to execution, was a deterrent, however a far more effective one, as the probability to be convicted and jailed was significantly higher. It is also important to note that the increase in prison population was also due to the increased number of police. There is an interdependency between the 2 factors. Now this will crack you up, guys. The emergence and recession of crack cocaine, that's right, was a key element in explaining the drop of crime rate during the 90s. Crack cocaine is a compound substance that is derived from a mixture of cocaine and baking soda, which gave it a good high for a reasonable price, unlike regular cocaine, which at that time was exclusive to the rich. Hence it made crack highly lucrative as it was more affordable. There was money to be made. Crack cocaine, due to its lucrative nature, inadvertently promoted violence as rival gangs began fighting for turf, which simply means area to sell drugs, in this case crack, and as a result mass shooting occurred. At its peak, nearly 6% of all arrests were crack related.
Crack was addictive. I mean, super addictive, way more than the powder. And it just swept through the neighborhood.
Spread your legs, man.
It also came with a tremendous amount of violence. Then LA got really, really dangerous, you know.
This gang member and 2 buddies were smoking crack cocaine in a garage when a rival gang drove up and shot them. 20 minutes after these pictures were taken, Lorenzo Crosby was dead.
There were, young kids on the block selling this. You get a sack and, you start flipping it. You have to protect your spot, so there's gunplay, there's gang warfare. It's really a dark place to be. It's surreal.
Now, here's the interesting part. As crack became more popular, the price of cocaine kept dropping, making it more affordable, ironically shifting the demand from crack to cocaine. Essentially, the crack bubble cracked. With crack oversupplied and demand dropping, it was no longer luring for gangs, as profits were not impressive. Gangs no longer fought for turf as they used to, and as a result, violent crime began to drop. Here is the final crucial factor that never received any media attention or even be mentioned by any politician. It is abortion. Inadvertently, thanks to a lady called Norma McCorvey and her court case Roe vs. Wade, which occurred in the 70s, had more to do with the drop in crime than any of the factors mentioned earlier. She was a poor, uneducated, unskilled, alcoholic, drug-abusing 21-year-old women who wanted to get an abortion in the state of Texas, where it was illegal at that time. Long story short, ultimately she won and started a wave of legalization in the US. So what does abortion have to do with crime? Unwanted pregnancy has a direct impact with crime. Children who are the result of unwanted pregnancy have a higher tendency to be criminals. Oftentimes, unwanted pregnancy are teen pregnancies. Teens who are not ready to be parents as they lack the financial maturity to be good parents. Statistics show that children growing up in improper guidance are often lured to crime, and studies have confirmed that children born in adverse environment have a higher propensity to be criminals for intuitive reasons. Abortion created an avenue that was not available previously for pregnant teens. So-called unwanted children who were likely to be criminals never came to be due to the easy availability of abortion. If this wasn't the case and abortion was illegal, unwanted pregnancy would have continued the crime trend through the 90s, which means these kids would have been in their 20s, which is the prime age for criminals. Essentially, abortion eliminated would-be criminals from the economy. It is worth mentioning that the late Christopher Hitchens alluded to this point, as he often emphasized that crime and poverty was closely related to women's rights.
What the cure for poverty really is, it eluded people for a long, long time. The cure for poverty has a name, in fact. It's called the empowerment of women.
Interesting, huh? Now, this is why, depending on conventional wisdom, may not be such a wise thing to do. Unlikely correlation often exists that we are unable to pick up on. Here are the media's topic coverage on reasons for the drop in crime during the 90s. You would notice that abortion was never mentioned. And thank you for watching.